Pro-life Catholic Africans stop Pope Francis and his population-controlling friends dead in their tracks. So what happened in Nairobi, and what does it tell us about the power of resistance? Tonight, from the editor's desk. Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt coming to you once again from the offices of the Remnant newspaper. Happy Advent to you all. Hope everyone's got their St. Andrew's Day novena going strong. We're almost to the midpoint of I know we're praying for the conversion of Pope Francis.
Good idea.
I think so. Maybe we should add a little novena to St. Jude on that one. I don't know, but power of prayer being what it is. We're also coming down the home stretch now to Christmas, my favorite time of the year. Even Francis can't ruin Christmas for me. I can't wait. I love Christmas. Christmas is the best. We got the baby Jesus coming, hopefully, if we've all been good. No Santa Claus in our house, of course. And as far as you're concerned, I'm supposed to point something. Well, actually, I was supposed to, I guess, just sit here and see if anybody notices that I'm actually wearing a Christmas gift idea from the Remnant. Two of them, actually, because we have the Sacred Heart pins, the Sacred Heart League now spreading all throughout the world. It's so incredibly hopeful and so wonderful. It's a bright spot, high point of our year now, thinking back on how that thing has taken off. That's just so wonderful. But also, we have T-shirts. Don't forget, we have T-shirts. This is a fine specimen, a fine example. I could pose and do all that stuff, but I'm terrible at selling stuff. I don't like raising money. I don't like selling stuff. But I was told I'm supposed to show you the T-shirts and encourage you to make one of these little T-shirts a beautiful little gift for someone come Christmas. Is that good?
Yes.
Did I do all right? Okay, that's great. So check out our Remnant Store series. It really will help the Remnant if you can go to our store and pick up a few things in time for Christmas. RemnantNewspaper.com it goes a long way to help us keep the newspaper coming every couple of weeks and keep these programs also coming on YouTube for as long as YouTube's going to allow us. We've been demonetized now. We're kind of on the way out, but for as long as YouTube allows us to continue with this program, we're going to do it. So now to tonight's topic. What's a bigger news story since the resurrection of Jesus Christ than the successor of St. Peter now handing over the church to the Soros cabal, to the one worlders, to the United Nations? What's a bigger story than this? I can't even think about it. I think we really need to get serious about this, and I think I'm not into sensationalism. I don't want to do a show just to get everybody worked up. I think that something can be done about this, but the only way anything can be done about what's happening right now is if we start waking people up, if we raise awareness, and we stand up and fight back. Because if they get their way, this is why it's so serious. If they get their way, and now with Francis's blessing, it's going to affect all of us, especially as Catholics. If they get their way, it means the end of things like national sovereignty, right? It means the end of borders. It means the end of Christian marriage, or at least our ability to use Christian morality to defend Christian marriage. Those days are going to be gone, because defending Christian morality is going to be considered hate speech. I mean, they basically, this Jeff Sachs crowd, the sustainable development crowd that he represents, they're now mandating that throughout the whole world, globally, countries are going to have an obligation to make contraception and abortion accessible to every little girl in the world. And that's going to include your homeschool daughters. So don't think you get out of this if you're homeschooling. They're not going to tolerate any resistance. These people are fanatical beyond words. And they were dancing all over the Vatican because part of their thing is climate change and all of that. But in order to save the climate, to save the world, we got to reduce the number of human beings, right? Which means we have to get done and get Christian morality out of the way, get the Catholic Church out of the way.
Some think that, excuse my wording, being good Catholics means we must be like rabbits. No, responsible parenthood.
Anyone who professes any allegiance to Jesus Christ whatsoever needs to get serious about these guys and what they're doing. Every time we do one of these programs, we get a half dozen or so of our Protestant friends. I'm guessing they're Protestant trolls. They come in here and they start continuing the old Martin Luther war against the church. You guys need to stop that if you're Protestants, okay? Because this isn't about Protestant versus Catholic. This is about Christian versus atheists, Christian versus globalists, okay? We don't worship statues. We don't worship the Blessed Mother, Mary, the Virgin. We do not worship her. We do not obviously worship the Pope. So can we put those 500-year-old talking points aside long enough to turn against the people that hate everyone who follows Jesus Christ? Christians have been shooting themselves in the head for too long. Christ said that we're supposed to turn the other cheek, right? But that doesn't mean we walk around slapping our own cheeks for no reason. We can get involved in here in this war, okay? And we need to. So, Africa. This is a Nairobi Summit, is what it was called, the Nairobi Summit, which was celebrating the 25th anniversary of the 1994 International Conference on Population and Development in Cairo, which some of you might remember. This is when 179 governments adopted the landmark Program of Action, it was called. And what this thing is foundational document for the United Nations Population Fund. I'm telling you, if you want to really be freaked out, just go ahead and Google the United Nations Population Fund. I don't want you to watch or read what somebody else is saying about these guys. Just go to their own website and check it out. And now they've become the global leader in promoting contraception and abortion to control the population throughout the whole world, especially in countries like Africa. I don't know how they get away with this without being called racist, because to me it seems to stink of racism. The little brown people, they can't be trusted to, not have a whole ton of kids, so we need to get in there and brainwash them and make sure that they comply with big global brother who wants to wipe them all out in order to save the planet. Why is this not racist? I don't know. But to get a flavor for this, let's listen to the opening statement. So this was the opening guns for the Nairobi conference. It was presented by the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Amina Mohammed.
We're here to reignite, accelerate, and keep the promise made at the landmark international conference, Population and Development, held in Cairo 25 years ago. As accelerators for the Sustainable Development Goals, the outcomes of the Program of Action must be carried forward. Achieving gender equality and women's empowerment and upholding women's rights is a game changer. The Sustainable Development Goals cannot and will not be achieved until women, girls, and young people are able to control their bodies and their lives and live. The power to choose the number, timing, and spacing of children is a human right. And that is why the Secretary General recently responded to the global call of our member states for a decade of action to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, building on the robust partnerships such as that of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Family Planning 2020, She Decides, Women Deliver, and it goes on. UNFPA is also working with young people to mobilize new partnerships for a new era to deliver on that promise.
Now, who is this lady? Well, she's a friend of our old buddy, Jeff Sachs, who's a special senior advisor to the United Nations. And he's also, of course, an advisor to Pope Francis and the gang over in the Vatican. But Ms. Mohammed also served as special advisor to the pro-abort Ban Ki-moon. Now, this is the guy who got the Sustainable Development Goals started in the first place. In fact, she co-wrote the 17 Sustainable Development Goals with Ban Ki-moon. Very close to Sachs. She also is a professor at Columbia University. So she's very tight with all the right people, especially with Francis's friends. And yet, the Vatican decided not to attend this Nairobi conference where she played a starring role. Now, why not? First of all, I would argue that the Nairobi Summit, unlike the Amazon Synod, was completely forthright and honest about the real agenda of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I was in the Vatican press office trying to find out what the connection is to the Sustainable Development Goals, what was really going on at the Amazon Synod. It was very difficult. It was like herding cats. They just simply wouldn't answer the questions. Well, now in Nairobi, they were very forthright about what it's all about. It's about contraception. It's about abortion. It's about brainwashing women into becoming disciples then of the Planned Parenthood agenda. And again, Africa is not the jungles of the Amazon. So there are plenty of faithful Catholic bishops in Africa who called out the Nairobi Summit for exactly what it is. The Kenyan pro-life movement also took to the streets in protest of Nairobi.
family. We have not been allowed inside.
And the fundamental babies, they don't want to hear a different voice. This is not freedom of expression, my guys.
And again, don't forget, Nairobi is based on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals.
As accelerators for the Sustainable Development Goals, the outcomes of the Programme of Action must be carried forward.
The Kenyan Catholic Bishops' Conference blasted the Nairobi Conference.
We do not believe that these are the issues that truly concern the development of women and humanity at large. We view this agenda as an intent to corrupt our young people and enslave them to foreign ideologies, for example, same-sex union and active homosexual activities.
God bless you, Your Excellency. And whoops, no wonder then, on October 24, 2019, just as the wheels were coming off the Amazon Synod over in Rome, the Holy See suddenly decided they were going to inform the government of Kenya that it would not participate in the Nairobi conference. Of course not. It would have been a PR nightmare for the Vatican, because they would have had to come now into Nairobi and publicly choose between the Catechism of the Catholic Church and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Would have been kind of tricky. And this would have been just a few days after Pope Francis's month-long love affair with Jeff Sachs at the Amazon Synod. Kind of a tight spot for them. Now, the Kenyan bishops, on the other hand, they saw right through this stuff. They saw right through the Vatican's hero, Jeff Sachs, and they saw right through Ms. Mohammed from the United Nations. These good African shepherds defended their sheep, right? They had the courage and the grace and the faith to defend their sheep against the United Nations game plan, which, by the way, is no longer about forced abortions or forced sterilizations, because that wasn't working too well. So there's a new population controlling agenda from the United Nations, and that is to brainwash women and girls everywhere.
But what we're doing actually is in Ghana and a whole host of countries, we're sending young women out, they're in their early 20s with cell phones, and they can track and go door to door and find out from women, were you taught about contraceptives? Was it voluntary? Did you have access? So I can now will be able to get data every month about contraceptive use.
And here's where it gets interesting. What they want to do is they want to integrate family planning, read contraception and abortion. They want to integrate this into primary public health care. You see how it's going to work? And this is they need to do this, and they also need to overcome cultural and religious taboos, so say they. In other words, Christian morality, and they need to spread the new contraceptive technologies throughout all the world, but especially in Africa. This is what the Sustainable Development Goals are all about, for anyone who will just simply Google it and read what they're really up to. And again, the African bishops said no, essentially no, to the Sustainable Development Goals. Why? Because Nairobi was obviously supported by the Bill Gates Foundation, by the International Planned Parenthood Federation. This wasn't hard to find out. They knew it. The International Planned Parenthood Federation was there. The UN Foundation, something called She Decides was there. All the pro-aborts were there backing this thing. Why? Because Donald Trump had pulled U.S. funding from abortion abroad. So these groups are raising money on their own.
And so why do you have now 200 million women that are telling us they want access to contraceptives, but they aren't available? It's because there's no funding for them. And so we got this back on the global agenda in 2012 because of its importance, but you have to fund it if you want to actually teach women about it and give them access.
The Trump administration's ambassador to Kenya issued a statement reaffirming U.S. commitment to protecting life and pointing out that Nairobi's commitment to achieve universal access to, quote, sexual and reproductive health and rights, end quote, is nothing more than code for global family planning that includes abortion. This is the very same language that is found in the Vatican-endorsed Sustainable Development Goal number 5.6. Ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights. You hear that?
Age-appropriate comprehensive sexuality education needs to be made compulsory.
In all schools from primary through to secondary, access
Access to sexual reproductive health services is an imperative right.
We realize for every man, woman, and child,
regardless of race, sexual orientation, and financial status.
more youth-friendly SRHR services.
And the Trump administration, representing pro-life America, they called this out. They called this out as nothing more than code for global promotion of abortion. The pro-life Catholic Africans, they called this out. They blasted it for the same exact reason that the Trump administration turned on it. But not Francis? Well, Francis didn't notice it? Francis didn't read Sustainable Development Goal number 5? He didn't see this? He can't possibly be this stupid where he doesn't know what he's endorsing, right? He's the Pope, for heaven's sakes. He stands before the whole world and he endorses this thing without condition.
The dramatic reality, this whole situation of exclusion and inequality, with its evident effects, has led me, in union with the entire Christian people and many others, to take stock of my grave responsibility in this regard and to speak out, together with all those who are seeking urgently needed and effective solutions. The adoption of the 2030 UN Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals is an important sign of hope.
Yes, and everyone nods their heads. Isn't that nice? Well, not everyone. The Kenyan Catholic bishops didn't nod their heads and say, "Isn't that nice?" They spoke out, and guess what? The Vatican quietly bowed out of the Nairobi Summit, which promoted the very same sustainable development. Their crime was to promote the very same sustainable development goals that the Vatican had been promoting 2 weeks earlier. Here again is Jeff Sachs speaking inside the Vatican during the Amazon Synod.
Pope Francis has played a truly a unique role in recent times to help get the world to the Sustainable Development Goals and to the Paris Climate Agreement, and to motivate people all over the world, including all of us, to take actions to achieve what is of fundamental significance for the world.
And after Jeff Sachs was done with that, we got photos here of the young people who were listening to Mr. Sachs outside of the Vatican now, outside of the Vatican conference, holding up signs in support of every one of the Sustainable Development Goals, every one of them. If you look at the photo, you can see even 5, even 3, the problematic ones that have to do with abortion and contraception. And again, this photo is from the Youth Symposium's own website, the sdsnyouth.org. They were supporting all of the Sustainable Development Goals inside the Vatican. And this is quite a contrast to Nairobi, where the Catholic young people stood up and said no to this. And guess what? The Vatican quietly bowed out of the Nairobi Summit. There's a reason why speaking out against totalitarian regimes, historically, there's a reason that was always the first thing that was banned by totalitarian regimes. It's freedom to speak out. After Hitler rose to power in 1933, one of the first things the Fuhrer did was establish the Ministry of Propaganda to suppress all opposing viewpoints and information. Why? Because resistance is never futile, and the Nazis knew it. When the Bolsheviks seized power in Russia in 1917 by championing, well, you guessed it, freedom, one of their first decisions was to limit free speech. In early November 1917, the Soviet government signed the Decree on Press, which prohibited publishing any bourgeois articles criticizing the Bolsheviks' authority. Why? Because resistance is never futile, and the Bolsheviks knew it. So, what are we going to do? What are we going to do about Francis? We're going to speak out, friends. Why? Because Francis can't handle it. The Amazon Synod was nearly derailed by one tiny act of resistance. And you know the splash that I'm talking about. A few bishops in Kenya single-handedly forced the Vatican, the mighty Vatican, to publicly distance itself from a globalist event in Nairobi, because that event was going to promote the very sustainable development goals that Francis himself promotes on a regular basis. So what do? We do what the Kenyan bishops did. We denounce this unholy alliance between Francis's Vatican and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development adopted by the United Nations in 2015 on the grounds, we resist this on the grounds that it is fundamentally pro-abortion. Now here's a screenshot of the UN.org page on Sustainable Development Goals. Do you see that? Access to legal abortion services needed to prevent 47,000 women dying each year. Okay? That's their website. And now here's Francis endorsing the very same United Nations pro-abortion agenda. Check it out again.
The adoption of the 2030 UN Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals is an important sign of hope.
Now, he's never disassociated himself from the goals, from goal number 5, for example, which calls for universal access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights. Francis has never done that. This is in direct violation to the infallible moral teachings of the Catholic Church, reiterated most recently in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Well, Francis never said, well, I accept all the goals except for number 5, did he? He's the Pope. He has an obligation before God and before all of us to come out and clarify, to come out and say, well, I definitely do not support the ones that are pro-abortion and pro-contraception, right? And yet he never did that. That the Holy Father is promoting the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations is a monumental scandal without precedent in the history of the Church, given what these goals include. Until he disassociates himself from Jeffrey Sachs, at least on these points, every Catholic in the world has an obligation before God to resist Francis to his face. We need to come together and resist this man. That's certainly what we here at The Remnant are doing and plan to do, and even more. And we even have the t-shirt to prove it. So we're going to push that program over 2020. We're going to have a lot of other things that have that hashtag and have that idea. So hopefully you'll jump on board with us. This is war. This is war, and I beg you, please, to join us, and let's go and resist this man, resist this agenda, and do whatever we possibly can, once again, to take our church back. I'm Michael Matt for Remnant TV, and we'll see you next time.